I have, I wear what the fuck I'm talking about. When I don't bother nobody, I wear what I want, I make my own money, I'm successful, I mind my fucking business. And
y'all, this didn't just go left. This went completely off the rails. What started as a simple trending debate just turned into a full-blown public meltdown, and at the center of it is Claressa Shields. And trust me, she did not come to play nice, because suddenly, out of nowhere, the internet decided to label her with ugly girl syndrome, questioning her confidence, her looks, even her entire identity. And at first, it looked like just another messy online take, just noise. But then, something shifted. Late night. No warning. No filter. She goes live. And the energy? Immediate. Aggressive. Personal. This wasn't a response. This was a warning. She didn't just deny it. She flipped the entire narrative, calling out the people behind it, accusing them of clout chasing, of using her name for clicks, for views, for attention. And the way she said it? It didn't sound like defense. It sounded like someone who's been pushed too far, but here's where it gets darker. Insiders are now hinting this wasn't random at all. Allegedly, this entire ugly girl syndrome narrative may have been building behind the scenes. Repeated trolling, constant body shaming, subtle attacks stacking up over time. And now, it's exploded. Because when she said, "You can't break me," that didn't feel like confidence. That felt like survival. So now the question is, was this just another viral moment, or did the internet finally push the wrong person to the edge?
how can I have when you say ugly girl syndrome, know that that's somebody who's a hater. Somebody who's constantly attacking people. Somebody who is making up things about people. Somebody who's not bothering them.
The live didn't just shake the timeline, it started pulling layers apart. Right after that explosive opening, the narrative begins to tighten, because now it's not just about what was said, it's about why it was said now. The clips start circulating faster, edits, reactions, breakdowns, and suddenly the same question keeps popping up across platforms. Why is everyone suddenly calling her insecure? Because according to multiple voices online, this didn't come out of nowhere. There's a growing claim that Claressa Shields has been quietly dealing with weeks of subtle shots, coded comments, indirect insults, and repeated attempts to paint her as overconfident to the point of delusion. At first, it looked like background noise, but now it's being reframed as a pattern. And this is where things begin to escalate, because when she addresses it, she doesn't sound confused. She sounds aware, calculated, like she already knows exactly who's been talking.
Also, ugly girl syndrome is calling a girl that's pretty ugly. So a lot of y'all have that. Because I know damn well that I'm not.
That moment hits differently in context. It's not just a clapback. It's a rejection of a label that, according to some insiders, was being pushed repeatedly behind the scenes to slowly chip away at her image. And then the pace drops. For a brief second, the aggression fades, and something more personal slips through. This is where the story takes an emotional turn, because instead of just attacking back, she starts explaining herself. Not to the haters, but almost to the audience watching. She talks about knowing who she is before fame, before pressure, before public scrutiny, and suddenly this isn't just about social media anymore, it's about identity.
It's already, so when it comes to y'all talking about oh, she's ugly, baby, I'm never going to believe that, because I've never thought that I was an ugly girl when I made it past that.
That line reframes everything, because now what looked like anger starts to feel like defense against something deeper, a constant attempt to rewrite how she sees herself. And according to some reports, that pressure hasn't just been online. There are whispers that people within the broader media space have been amplifying these narratives quietly, letting them build until they explode publicly. And if that's true, then this wasn't just random trolling, it was build-up. Calculated or not, it's stacked, which leads to the bigger allegation now gaining traction, that this entire ugly girl syndrome narrative may have been less about opinion and more about control. Control over perception, control over image, control over how far someone like Claressa can rise before the internet tries to humble her. Because every time she asserts dominance, financially, physically, publicly, the backlash seems to follow. And that's where the pattern starts forming. Critics say her reaction proves she's triggered. Supporters say it proves she's been targeted. But both sides agree on one thing. This didn't start with the live. The live was the result. So now the real question isn't what she said. It's who kept pushing until she had no choice but to say it. The situation doesn't cool down after that moment. It actually gets more intense, more personal, and a lot more calculated, Because once that emotional layer is exposed, the conversation online shifts again. It's no longer just about confidence or insults. Now people are dissecting her reaction, frame by frame, tone by tone, and that's where the narrative starts getting dangerous. Some are now claiming that Claressa Shields didn't just respond, she snapped. That the aggression, the sharp tone, the refusal to back down, all of it is being spun as proof that something deeper is going on beneath the surface, but others are pushing back hard, because what looks like aggression to some looks like defense under pressure to others, and this is where the escalation really begins. The live wasn't just her speaking, it was her setting boundaries, very clearly, very directly, almost like she knew that staying silent any longer would only make things worse.
Come bothering me, it's like, oh, Claressa got ugly girl syndrome. No, if a girl come disrespecting me or a man, I'm gonna disrespect them back.
That moment lands like a line in the sand, because now the tone has fully shifted. This isn't explanation anymore, and this is confrontation. And the message is simple. If you come for her, she's not ignoring it. She's responding, and she's doing it louder. But here's where it gets complicated, because the louder she gets, the more the backlash grows. Clips start getting reposted with captions twisting her words. Reaction channels begin framing her as pressed, triggered, even unstable. And suddenly, the same people who were calling her confident just days ago are now questioning everything about her demeanor. And that contradiction, it doesn't feel accidental. There's a growing theory circulating that this entire situation has turned into a feedback loop where the more she defends herself, the more fuel it gives to the narrative trying to tear her down. And if that's true, then she's trapped in it. Respond, and they say you're bothered. Stay silent, and they say it's true. Either way, the story keeps moving without you. And right in the middle of that storm, another key moment surfaces, one that shifts the focus away from emotion and straight into reality.
If you don't like my hair, so what? If you don't like my clothes, so what? Do you pay my bills? You don't.
That line cuts through everything, because now it's no longer about opinions, it's about ownership, her life, her choices, her image, and more importantly, who actually has the right to speak on it. It's a reality check that doesn't just challenge the critics, it exposes the imbalance, because the same voices judging her aren't living her life. They're watching it, commenting on it, monetizing it, and that's where the bigger allegation starts gaining traction. That this entire situation, from the ugly girl syndrome label to the viral clips, isn't just random internet chaos. It's part of a larger pattern where strong, outspoken figures get targeted the moment they stop fitting into a comfortable narrative. And Claressa, she doesn't fit quietly. She's loud about her success, loud about her independence, loud about her identity. And historically, that kind of presence doesn't go unchallenged online. So when the criticism started building, it didn't just stay criticism, it turned into something more coordinated. Or at least, that's what some insiders are now suggesting. There are whispers that certain creators may have amplified the narrative intentionally, picking moments, clipping reactions, framing them in ways that would generate maximum engagement, not necessarily because it was true, but because it would go viral. And if that's the case, then this isn't just commentary anymore, it's strategy. Because controversy sells, and attaching a strong name to a negative label, that spreads fast. But here's where things slow down again, just for a moment, because behind all the noise, there's a quieter question starting to surface. What does this kind of pressure actually do to someone over time? Because according to some reports, this wasn't just a one-day situation. The comments, the jokes, the repeated narratives, they didn't start with the live, and they didn't end with it either. They built up, layer by layer, until eventually, something had to give. And maybe that live wasn't an overreaction. Maybe it was a release. A breaking point that had been delayed for weeks and maybe even longer. But instead of seeing it that way, the internet does what it always does. It reacts. Quickly, loudly, without context. And now the narrative is split in two directions. On one side, people are saying she proved them right, that her response showed insecurity, that the label fits, that the reaction says more than the accusation ever did. On the other side, people are saying she proved them wrong, that standing up for yourself isn't weakness, that refusing to be disrespected isn't insecurity, that confidence doesn't have to be quiet to be real. And somewhere in between those two sides, the truth gets harder to see, because the louder both sides get, the more the actual moment gets buried under interpretation, which brings everything back to the pattern, because this isn't the first time someone's image has been shaped in real time by viral clips and public opinion. It's not even rare anymore. Take a statement, isolate it, amplify it, repeat it, and suddenly, perception becomes reality. And once that happens, it's almost impossible to reverse. So now the question isn't just about what she said, it's about what people chose to hear. And maybe more importantly, what they wanted to believe in the first place. Because if the narrative was already building before the live, then maybe the live didn't create the story. It just confirmed it for those who were already convinced. But if that's true, then there's something even bigger happening here, because this wouldn't just be about one person defending themselves. It would be about how easily a narrative can be constructed, amplified, and solidified, all in real time, all in public, and all without ever needing full proof. And if that's the case, then the real question isn't whether Claressa is unbreakable, it's how many times someone can be pushed before the response becomes the story they were trying to force all along. By the time the dust should have settled, it didn't. It got louder, because now the story isn't just circulating, it's evolving in real time. Every repost, every reaction, every clipped moment is adding a new layer, a new interpretation, a new angle that keeps pushing the situation further away from what actually happened and closer to what people want it to be. And that's where things turn from messy to calculated, because at this stage, it's no longer about a single live session or a single statement. It's about the aftershock, the way the internet takes a moment and stretches it, reshapes it, and replays it until it becomes something bigger than the original event. And right now, Claressa Shields is at the center of that machine. Clips are looping, headlines are getting more aggressive, narratives are becoming more definitive, even though nothing has actually been confirmed beyond what was said in that moment. But that doesn't slow anything down. If anything, it speeds it up. Because once a name starts trending in a negative context, it doesn't just stay contained. It spreads across platforms, across audiences, across communities that weren't even part of the original conversation. And with each new audience comes a new judgment. Some are now reframing her entire persona, not just this moment. They're going back, pulling old clips, old interviews, old reactions, trying to build a bigger picture that supports whatever side they've chosen. And that's the key word here, chosen. Because at this point, people aren't just watching anymore, they're deciding. And once they decide, everything they see gets filtered through that decision, which is exactly how narratives solidify. But then, a new shift happens. Because instead of more explanations, more defenses, more breakdowns, the tone coming from her side becomes colder, sharper, less emotional, more direct, almost like the realization has already hit. This isn't about clearing anything up. This is about control. Control of the story, control of the image, control of how far this goes.
Y'all can't get no clicks unless you mention Claressa Shields.
That moment doesn't sound like frustration anymore. It sounds like awareness, because now the focus isn't on the insult, it's on the system behind it. The clicks, the views, the engagement, the way a name can be used as fuel for other people's platforms. And if that's true, then this situation was never just about perception. It was about value, because attaching a strong, recognizable name to controversy guarantees attention, and attention is currency, which raises the bigger implication now being discussed quietly in certain circles. What if this entire situation wasn't just organic? What if it was amplified intentionally, not necessarily started with bad intent, but once it gained traction, it became something people benefited from keeping alive, because the longer it trends, the more it pays. And if that's the case, then the person at the center isn't just defending themselves from opinions, they're defending themselves from a system that profits off their image being questioned. That's a different kind of pressure, a deeper one, because you can't just respond to it once and end it. It keeps regenerating. Every reaction video, every breakdown, every comment section debate, it all feeds back into the same loop. And at some point, the original moment almost stops mattering. All that matters is the version of it that people have accepted, which brings everything to a standstill, because now there are two completely different realities existing at the same time. In one version, she's exactly what critics are saying, triggered, defensive, proving their point with every response. In the other version, she's exactly what supporters are saying, targeted, pushed, refusing to let the narrative break her. Both versions are loud, both versions are spreading, and neither one is slowing down. So where does that leave the truth? Somewhere in between, or buried entirely, because once perception perception takes over, facts don't disappear. They just become less important, and that's what makes this moment heavier than it looks on the surface. Because this isn't just about one label, it's about how quickly a label can stick, how easily it can spread, and how hard it is to remove once it's everywhere. And maybe that's why the tone shifted at the end, less emotional, more controlled, almost like someone who understands that fighting every narrative isn't the solution anymore, because you can't out-argue something that people want to believe, but you can outlast it. At least, that's the strategy it seems to be moving toward. Let the noise peak, let the cycle burn itself out, and stand firm long enough that whatever sticks doesn't define everything. But even that comes with a risk, because the internet doesn't always forget. Sometimes it archives. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it brings things back at the worst possible moment. And if this situation has already reached this level from one live session, then the final question becomes unavoidable. If this is how far things went from one narrative, what happens if another one starts, and just when it feels like the storm might slow down, it doesn't? Because this isn't one of those moments that fades quietly. This is the kind that lingers, mutates, and comes back louder every time her name trends again. The narrative has already been planted, and now it's growing in directions no one can fully control. What started as a label turned into a weapon. What looked like a reaction turned into a storyline. And now the internet isn't asking what really happened, it's choosing what version of the story it wants to believe. That's how reputations shift overnight. And the most dangerous part? It doesn't require proof. It just requires repetition, because every repost reinforces it. Every reaction validates it. Every debate keeps it alive. And while people argue over who's right and who's wrong, the damage quietly spreads in the background. But here's what makes this different. She didn't back down. She didn't soften the message. She didn't play the safe route people expected. Instead, she doubled down. And that changes everything, because now this isn't just about defending an image. This is about refusing to let the internet rewrite it. And that kind of resistance, it doesn't end quietly. It either shuts everything down, or it makes the situation even bigger. So now all eyes are locked in, watching, waiting. Because if one live session triggered this level of chaos, then whatever happens next might not just break the internet, it might redefine who really controls the narrative.